Hey guys, in this video I'm going to take you behind the scenes on that intro montage I just played you for a recent production that we did. And to provide as much value as possible, I'm going to break this down into 6 key areas. The first is we're going to be discussing the brief and what the client was actually looking for. We're then going to talk about the team and who we subcontracted and what roles each person played in this production. Then I'll move on to some of the equipment that we used, as well as some of the filming techniques we used to bring this whole production together and make it look visually stunning. Then I'll be moving on to some of the challenges that we face, because as you know, if you're in the filmmaking industry, then you're definitely in the business of problem solving. So I'm going to talk you through some of the key areas and challenges that we had to overcome and things that you can apply for your own business in that section. Next up is the editing and post-production phase, before finally moving on to any changes. If we were to do this all again, what would we make different? And for those of you who stay until the end of the video, I'm going to be sharing with you my tips on what made this production so successful between us and the client, so that you can copy and paste this template to make sure you always achieve great results. So the client we were working for was the Snow Center, and these guys actually sponsored me back when I was a professional skier, and it's been really nice to continue working with them through my journey of being a videographer and running a video production company. They actually have an external ads agency that we have a really good relationship with too. And they came to us with the idea of releasing a whole set of ads that were focused on the elements, the real experience and the feeling you get of snow sports. Now, they have a long-standing ambassador, 2-time Olympian Jamie Nichols, and a very good friend of mine. So they naturally brought him along to be involved with this project as well. But it was all about the elements and how we can showcase that to someone that's never experienced the cold of snow before, and how we can excite them in a very new and standout way, opposed to just recording some general videos of the Snow Center in normal open hours, I guess. So we all collectively came up together with more of a brief. We worked closely with the ads agency to really develop that and come up with some ideas of what was possible from a creative standpoint. And we worked really well with their team to actually develop the overall concept. The campaign as a whole was basically going to feature one main video with lots of cut downs beneath it that they would then use for various different social ads. So they would have the main ad video, and then they would have lots of social teasers and things that they could put out thereafter, along with a selection of photos. And that's becoming so much more common now with our industry, is not just producing one main video, but then using that video for Instagram Reels, TikToks, so on and so forth, so that it can really cover as much of a wide exposure standpoint as possible, especially when they're trying to obviously generate more business at the end of the day, so they need more eyeballs on that. The guys expressed that they really wanted to hear the natural crunch of the snow, so we really led down that route with doing a video that relied heavily on sound effects and not using music just as a general backing track. Collectively, we came up with an animatic and a storyboard of what we wanted to achieve, and then we had to put the team in place. Now, obviously, this is a little bit easier because we have a team in-house here, but what's more important are the roles that each person played, and we did actually outsource one of those roles as well. So to start with, I was going to be the director of photography. Because I can ski and film at the same time, it just made total sense that I kind of took the lead role in that aspect. I then had Nathan, who was going to effectively act as the director on set, and he would be working closely with the client and the ads agency just to make sure we were ticking off everything that we needed to. It basically means that I could focus on the shot in hand, and he can be reviewing it with the client and getting it signed off as we go. We all took a supporting role by helping us with lighting and setting up and basically running a lot of things on the day, as well as getting a few behind the scenes clips that you guys have been watching. And that's a huge important thing about outsourcing as well, is identifying the things that you don't do as well, but that will have the bigger impact on your production. Because this was a bigger production, we had the ability to outsource these things, and we looked at the one area where we felt like we couldn't do the best job on our own and was one of the most important factors. So we brought Max on board, and as a result we were able to learn lots and also get the job done and do an amazing job at the end of the day. So for the equipment side of things, we went with our FS7 hooked up to a Movi M15. And the thing that I love about the Movi is even though it's an older version, it's super lightweight and gets the job done. This thing's literally been around the world with me, and it's such a good piece of equipment to have because it's lightweight and it's carbon fiber. So when you're holding it, you want to save as many pounds as you can, especially when you're having to carry this thing around all day. So we absolutely love that bit of equipment. We then have the tilter nucleus hooked up to the camera so we can remotely control the wireless follow focus. So Nathan's job would actually be, while he's watching the content through our Hollyland wireless monitor that's also hooked up to the camera, he can be then controlling the focus. So I just need to point the camera in the right direction and he can be judging the focus to make sure everything is as crisp and clean as it can be. The one thing I've got to say is the Hollyland monitors are like one of our favorite bits of equipment to take. We always set them up. You can stream it to your phone, but just the easy nature from going from your camera into this monitor was such a help. And the range on it as well really allowed us to hide all the crew out of the way while we got the shot, and then actually still deliver great quality with like no latency as well. So I'm just going to shout them out. They're not sponsoring it, but I just thought that was a really kind of key tool to the success of this production. For lenses, we mainly just stuck with our kind of entry-level cine lenses, which is our Samyang 24mm and our Samyang 35mm. We used 100mm macro on a couple of shots, but generally speaking, it was between those three lenses. And again, it was just really nice. They give a real crisp, clean image. They allow more light into the sensor as well, so it meant that we could shoot things slightly brighter and then bring it down in post, which would eventually kind of reduce some of that noise that would be introduced to the camera as well. Of course, lighting was a huge part of this production, which is why we brought Max on board, and he brought with him his Aperture 300D with a Fresnel lens adapter, which basically allowed us to take the light and from rather than it being kind of quite wide, it narrows it right down into kind of more of a spotlight, which is exactly what we wanted. And I must say, with that and the aperture, it was kind of a perfect amount. And then we used our Falcon Eyes softbox just for a couple of kind of like accent lights from time to time, but generally speaking, the main light we used was just the single 300D with this Fresnel adapter on it, and that was literally perfect for the shot. So I thought he did a really good job, and it was more interesting to see how Max used the light and how we cut out other light as well, and the importance of that in itself. So actually looking at, for instance, in the walking out shot, there was a huge light that we couldn't turn off because it was vital to the security of the building. So then we had to cut that light. And initially we thought, oh, it doesn't look too bad. But as soon as we blocked that light out by throwing some kind of blankets over the top of it, then it just made the whole scene look totally different. And that was kind of a big aha moment for me, because at this point I'm focused on growing the business, and I bring in the creatives to kind of really focus on the production and the quality that we provide. And actually for me, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense to actually reduce more of this light. And I think back to so many more productions where if I had actually just thought or spent another 15 minutes looking at the lighting, I could have actually probably done a much nicer job. So I thought that was really cool. But yeah, that was the equipment that we used for the project on the whole. In terms of the shots, it was pretty much always me either skiing or it was me just walking around behind Jamie. And there wasn't actually too many shots to be had. The only one time I did take the rig and pull it onto my shoulder was when I'm standing next to the jump and getting him to come up and over, just because it's an absolute nightmare trying to tilt a massive rig upwards. And it meant that I could be a little bit more nimble, come in under the jump and try and get a few different angles that were just a bit more unique and try and time it correctly where I could. Of course, like any production, there's so many challenges to face on something like this, and the main thing for us were kind of two key areas. One was the time of day that we had to film this. So we filmed this from around about midnight till around about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, but we were meant to start, I think, closer to 9 p.m. So we actually lost a huge chunk of time while the slope was being prepared. And you know how productions are, they always take longer than you actually anticipate anyway. And then it turned out that we needed to be wrapped up by, I think, 4 a.m. And that was, we weren't aware of that initially. And when we found that information out, we then had to really look at the list and be a little bit more like, okay, well, at the end of the day, to get the job done, what areas can we cut? And that's challenging, because then you're looking at the list thinking you don't really want to drop any of these key areas, but you're having to in order to get time-wise. Now, the other thing that added to that system was every time Jamie would do a run, he would then have to get the lift back up to the top. So it was taking like 5 minutes per shot. So the real importance laid on us making sure we got that shot to begin with. And because we didn't have lots of lights and we couldn't spotlight everything, we just used one light. So the way we focused on this was we shot the rail feature first. We got 2 or 3 shots on that, then 2 or 3 shots on the jump, and then 2 or 3 shots on the bottom feature, and then just had to kind of compile them together and be a little bit more cutthroat. In an ideal world, I would have actually wanted to spend more time on each feature, making sure it was lit exactly how we wanted it to, make sure Jamie did the best trick and we got the best shot, because he's got to do the best trick and we've got to make sure we get that shot first time. Otherwise, we have to do it again. And you can see, the time ticking down. And that was kind of a huge factor for us. That was a challenge that we kind of had to overcome. Of course, the other thing is skiing in the dark. When that spotlight is not on you, you think it fills the rest of the building, but it doesn't. Because we've got that Fresnel light lens on, it's just focused on like the one spotlight, one feature. So when you're skiing along outside that, you cannot see anything apart from maybe a light in the distance. And that was so disorientating and made me like really nauseous. It was crazy. I hadn't experienced really anything like that before. So God knows how Jamie managed to do it, having to snowboard through complete darkness and the pitch black, and then go and do actually a trick as soon as he hits the light. But I guess that's why he's a 2-time Olympian and I'm not, basically. So yeah, out of the whole production though, my favorite shot has to be the one where Jamie is walking up the slope before he starts his run. I just feel like it's really powerful. It's very kind of Netflix style. It's nicely composed and it feels quite ominous as well. It just feels really nice. I love the light behind it, so that has to be actually my favorite shot, and arguably probably one of the more easy ones to actually do, but that's the way it goes. Once we finished the shoot, we brought it straight back into the edit, and the edit was a pretty straightforward process because we had our storyboard, we had a mood board, and we knew kind of roughly how it was all going to come together from the night, because it wasn't a huge project in terms of the amount of shots we had. It was a nice straightforward process. We just spent a lot of time on color grading. Like I said before, in terms of our kind of like settings in our camera, we shot it at 6400 in the camera. In terms of ISO, we shot 25 frames, I think, for everything, and then 4K footage. And with the aperture, we had it at round about, I think, T1.5 for a lot of them, or maybe T2 where we could, but it had to be quite shallow to let as much light as we could in, because we knew we'd introduce some grain through the ISO, and then in post we were able to bring those colors down and make everything a lot darker and kind of compress some more of that noise. And I think the end result was really nice. We know the cameras actually performed pretty well at 6400 ISO, but yeah, spending some time on that was really nice. And I'll actually dive into a different section on the color grading. That was a bit of a nightmare, and I would definitely change that again if I had to do another production like this. And of course, the key part of the edit being the sound effects. Now, we only recorded around about 10% of those sound effects actually on the day. Again, because we didn't have time, it was more important that we got the shots rather than getting the sound effects. We thought we could always come back worst case. So we only recorded a few shots actually just by pointing the zoom mic, or we had a shotgun mic plugged into our zoom recorder, and we literally just put that right next to the bindings while he kind of strapped them up. But 90% is all sound effects used from our library. We were fortunate to already have a library of sound effects as well, so we just utilized that from previous projects to really bring this to life and make it such an immersive experience. I'd argue that you can't make your video kind of three-dimensional and immerse the viewer without the use of sound effects. If you're just putting music in the background, your video is still going to feel quite flat. So if you can introduce sound effects, it gives it that new dimension and really makes a huge impact. Even if you just spend half an hour on every project by bringing in sound effects, it's definitely something that's going to make your work a lot better. So if we did this whole project again, what would we actually do differently? Well, I think one of the main bits for me was I didn't think about they have this big machine called the Piste Basher, and that basically grooms the whole slope and builds these features. It's got really strong spotlights on top, so we actually used that to light the bottom feature, and we thought it would be really cool with the Piste Basher in the background. and the light tone is far more tungsten, so it had a much more orange look to it than our aperture, which was a much cooler tone. And we knew this on the day, but we kind of thought, oh, it's probably okay, we can probably just kind of edit that in post. And although we could have spent more time on that, I just think it was kind of like chalk and cheese. Like, it just didn't really go as well. And that was a bit of a shame. That was the only thing that I think I would do differently next time, is I would just stick with one color light tone, or put a lens through it, just a filter to change the color of the tungsten light a little bit. But that's something I kind of regret not doing on the day, with the excuse of time and having to be out of there with not very long left of the shoot. We just kind of had to cut some corners and be like, yeah, let's just do this. This is parked here for now, so let's just utilize what we already had. But yeah, I did think that had an impact on the overall production, to be fair. If we were to do this again as well, although we had a great result from the aperture, I think I would probably have more lights. I think you can never really have too many lights. We didn't have another Fresnel lens to narrow it into a spotlight either, but that's definitely something I would do. I'd probably try and have 2 lights with those lenses on, just for efficiency and help him with the flow of, us getting shots, and also for the athlete as well, and spotlighting these features would have just sped up the process a little bit as well. Other than that, I think the production went pretty well. I guess focus is always really hard, actually, to be fair. Whenever you're shooting anything nighttime related, it's pretty much impossible, as I'm sure you know, to get a good focus. And especially if you're using peaking within the camera, it finds it really hard to pick up on it, because it's basically looking at different shades of dark and doesn't quite know from that contrast what's in focus and what's not. Other than putting on some better lenses, maybe bumping up the ISO a bit and kind of playing around with that side of things, I think we were happy with the camera settings on the whole. But yeah, the focus is always going to be a challenging aspect, to be fair, at the end of the day. So some tips if you want to manage bigger productions that just made this more successful for us. You have to have a storyboard. Absolutely. You need to be clear on what shots you need to get so you can be efficient with your time. Even if we had all the time in the world but had to shoot it at nighttime, no one wants to be there from 9 p.m. until like 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. So try and condense that down as much as possible, and a storyboard will enable you to do that, or at least a shot list. If you can combine that with a mood board, the mood board was great just to keep looking back through with the director, just to kind of be like, okay, is this the tonality that we wanted? We know the shot is Jamie walking through the door, but what happens on the other side of that door? And do we want it to feel like this? How do we want that overall thing to feel like? Because again, when you're in these shoots, your head's so in the zone that it makes it really hard to kind of think creatively sometimes on the spot. So if you've got your mood board and your storyboard as well, the two work really well. And it also means the client's on the same page as you. You can't get the shot and then them say that what you filmed is completely different to what they've said, because everyone's on the same page because it's visually there. Another tip is to make sure that everyone is clear on roles and particularly timescales. And when I say everyone, what we learned is that everyone, including the client and behind the scenes at the client's end, because if those people aren't aware and we run in the production thinking we have all of this extra time and then what turns out we don't, that's obviously a huge detrimental factor to the overall production. So make sure everyone is aware of timescales, and make sure the client is, but also who the client needs to manage on their side as well is really, really helpful, just as a kind of a tip moving forward. Certainly something that we're going to be incorporating more of, and just getting that understanding of, okay, great, this is what we're going to do. Is everything okay your side? Is there anyone that you need to notify that might not be aware of this production happening and what goes into this production that actually should be involved? My final tip's about equipment, and I just don't think you need to overcomplicate it. I do see people go into relatively small shoots with like bags and bags and boxes of like equipment, and I sometimes think that the bigger the rig is, the harder it is to get things creative with it. And I think there's a lot to be said from de-rigging the camera and just having it you and the camera and a lens and just getting some kind of more unique shots. I personally really like that. You can fit in smaller, tighter gaps and all of those things, and you'll be surprised at what can come out of it. So I don't think you need to think these productions are tons and tons of people, tons and tons of equipment. Like I said, we could have done this with the FS7, the Movi, the wireless follow focus, a monitor, and a light. And that would have basically done the job for us. And that is pretty much, to be fair, what we ended up using for the most part. So I don't think you need to overcomplicate it by having tons and tons of equipment on set, especially if you're not doing a real high-end production, whereas it might be more necessary. Obviously, you guys know we're often focused on the business side of filmmaking, and so this is a little bit of a different video, so I would love to know, what did you think? Just let me know in the comments. Did you enjoy this type of video? Do you want to see more of this? Maybe we can actually take you on site as well, presuming the clients are happy with that. So let me know what you thought in the comments below. And if you're interested in knowing what to do when a client hates your work, then take a little look at this video here. There's loads of tips that will avoid those difficult conversations and difficult situations that unfortunately do happen from time to time. So make sure you check that out. Let me know what you thought in the comments below about this video. Until next time, peace.